Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of I Am Legion for Dying Light 1 and 2. My name is Jason, the creator of the mod, and this is really a test. I'm getting things set back up. I know previously there has been some issues with the streaming quality, and so that's something that I'm trying to fix here. And so I'll do a little bit of testing here, and then we'll start to dive right in to show you guys something that I've been working on that I'm really excited about. So let me go to my studio really quick. And say, let me go to my studio really quick. All right, looks like there's a little bit of warble, but for the most part, it looks like the quality is okay. Let me go to my studio really quick. All right, I'm actually going to make one setting change here. Let's try to get this, let's mess with this. Let me go to my studio really quick. And let's see if that fixes things. All right, I'm actually going to make one setting change here. Let's try to get this, let's mess with this. Let me go to my studio really quick. And let's see if that fixes things. Test, test, test. I'm actually going to make one setting change here. Let's try to get this, let's mess with this. All right, I think that should have done it. Setting change here. Let's try to get this, let's mess with this. Let's mess with. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and jump right in and see if this one pans out. If not, let's see. So I've already got a warning here on the bit rate. That's the thing that I was running into previously, is where for whatever reason it would start to run into up and down concerns. No idea why that is. So I do apologize if there's been any quality issues previously. I'm going to try to iron these out here as we get started and continue forward. But it's just good to be back, and I look forward to talking with everybody here as we start to dive through some of the new stuff. So let me check one last thing here. Make sure that so the stream rate's all being managed by YouTube. So I don't know why it keeps running into those issues, but I guess we'll find out how this one does, and I'll keep trying to test and try different things as we go. So welcome back, guys, to my channel. If you've been gone for a little while, I have been working really hard in the background. For those of you who have been jumping on the launcher recently, there have been a ton of new changes. The biggest one is just the fact that there is a launcher now, but probably the best part is that something that I originally was concerned about writing because of the fact that it would go onto everybody's systems and then would pull from a server, and I didn't know how well that would go for everybody. So it took a little while to kind of figure out the approach with the launcher, but I believe this latest version has been working really well for most people from what I've seen. If you guys have feedback or thoughts about the latest version, if you've been running into issues, please reach out to me. Please join the Discord. That's always the easiest way to actually let me know what's going on inside the game and inside the launcher, is to just jump on the Discord and give feedback. But this was designed so that you would be able to go in and and immediately select the different options. There's been lots of small fixes and changes here. I was able to get out several of the things that I had planned for this year. The EULA definitely set me back a little bit as far as my excitement to work on the project. Also, Techland kind of ghosting me there has also set things back a little bit. It's been frustrating, but I understand they got a lot going on. So we did get the survival options out. I'm still continuing to balance that. Inventory management has always been something that a lot of the players for Dying Light 2 have reported they don't really care for. And so because of that, I've released a module. That's kind of the hope of doing this launcher system to begin with, was to allow lots of changes and modifications to the code without actually having to force players to do things that they didn't want to necessarily do, such as, for example, in the future, I am going to try to look at moving the armor system into a module as well, just because I know with the clipping, still an issue for the armor. That's over on Techland's side, nothing I can do about it. And then additionally, working with the different features that I've added over the last 2 years. Some things are with the feedback, some people really enjoy them, some people don't. Trying to build that out to where it's all modular while also maintaining the code has been kind of a challenge. So this is my way of, trying to support you guys by saying, thank you so much for playing. Here are some settings that you can modify that I have set up code to where it's going to be easier for me on the back end to go through and actually be able to support these things in the future. I'm going to show you guys a little bit of my code that I set up for the language support, which is a big one. That's actually something that has been a challenge over the last couple of years, is supporting the different languages, but then also supporting your guys' updates. So as you guys go in there and actually make changes, I want to be able to actually get those and immediately update those inside the code. And immediately doing that has always been kind of the challenge. For any of you guys who are new to the mod, basically, if you are an international player, I did try to create kind of a translation sheet so that you could come in and review the different available translations. There has always been a character issue with trying to inject these into the game. So if there are certain characters, it just doesn't translate. You can do certain translations for like menu items, but as far as the descriptions and the titles, for whatever reason, they still don't have character support for easily injecting new characters and translating those. And so for whatever reason, that continues to just be a challenge of actually being able to get some of these other languages in there. For example, obviously Japanese, Korean. I'm not able to actually inject any of those, and so hopefully it helps to have this sheet available so that if you do have questions, if you are curious about the translations, you can go look those up in here. But one of the things that I set up is actually the code to where it now pulls this data that you guys have entered in here, and this is actually multiple branches inside my Git repository. And so when you guys make those changes inside the sheet, before I was having to manually go and update each individual sheet with your changes by copying and pasting every individual cell. As you can imagine, that was kind of a pain in the ass. Well, I actually wrote a Python script now that goes through, and not only does it select the different GitHub branches, but it actually sets them, it injects the code, it writes everything for me, and then it immediately pushes that into my new release system so that I can easily release this out to you guys with a hotfix through the launcher. And so that has been that's something that for a simple update before, it would probably take anywhere from 2 to 3 hours just to copy that information off of Git or off of Google and get it inside the code and then get it released to you guys. It now takes probably less than a minute to do all that. That's the beauty of writing this code, is that the more code you write, the more automated, you get these processes, and that feeds into what I'm writing and working on right now that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But so that's one of the examples of some of the code that I've been putting together. But on top of that, being able to have this launcher and support you guys with different events. So I have a lot of different events coming. I have a lot of different modules coming. And as always, more support for my Patreon supporters. Huge shout out to those guys for continuing to support me as I continue to figure out, what the Patreon is. And how I can, give back. And one of the ways I'm hoping is through this software that I'm developing now as a thank you for a lot of their support over the last year and so. But one of the things that I've been trying to get set up, and to lend to that, if you guys have thoughts of content that you would like to see here in the future that's developed specifically for Patreon accounts that makes it worth it, that makes supporting my work even more beneficial to you guys, please let me know what those ideas are. I'm very happy to continue to write and design for the community, and so obviously I'm not trying to get into a bubble with a lot of this stuff. I'm trying to make this relevant to what you guys are actually looking forward to playing. So the launcher still has a couple of things here and there, but basically the idea is that once you go through and you select all the different things, you can install it. It'll immediately inject all the code into your game, and you can now no longer have to worry about it unless, for example, you want to just come back and change a difficulty. You can go install it again, and you'll now have this new difficulty installed for all future updates. From here, once everything's set up, all you have to do is press this Update I Am Legion Reborn button, and you're back up and running. And so any updates that come out, it'll let you know when the game is outdated. So for example, if this is red, it means there's a newer version. You have to pull that version, it'll automatically install, and you're good to go. On top of that, I've also integrated a lot of the tools that I had previously, but then more tools that I've written. So for example, the mod config. So I came up with this concept a couple of months back, this idea that you could immediately modify the custom script that I've already set up that modifies a lot of the content inside the game. I hooked all that up to an interface so that you can easily go in here and make changes to the different components of the game. There's a lot of different things you can do here. You can accomplish probably thousands of different mods that you find on the Nexus that a lot of people have concerns about, like, well, is this mergeable? Is this can I add this mod and this mod and this mod and this mod? This one, increases your ability to do lock picking, and this one increases the amount of spawns and all of that. I've tried to take all of that and turn it into what you can achieve through the mod config. And once you have everything set up how you want it, you can then actually go and create a config for yourself. So you can save a config in here and actually store that inside the files. And the idea is that as this mod config updates in the future, everything will automatically be updated by my software. So if it sees changes, it knows how to update the code and continue to manage that data so that it's able to understand what changes you have made. So it keeps and holds on to those so that you don't have to modify this ever again once you find that perfect balance. These will always be changing, and as far as how this changes with time, it's always up to the updates. So as they put out new updates, I'm kind of subject to however the back end changes as well. And so sometimes things are working perfectly, and there's been these little golden moments where everything ran perfect, and then an update came out, and it still is not the exact same way I had it, but that's been the journey over these last 2 years. I've probably rewritten the same content probably 10 times by now, and so that's been interesting, frustrating for sure. But that's how it goes with time. The game has gotten a lot better than it was when it was first released, so I'm very happy to see those changes, and we'll see where it goes over this next year. So that's the mod config. Once you've made your changes, you can hit save mod pack, and this immediately pulls and updates the file that is already in the game. So you don't have to do anything as far as opening any data packs or changing anything. This automatically updates those files so that you don't have to do it again. And so next we have the Savegame tool. So I actually am a really big fan of the Savegame tool. The Savegame tool loads your save games, so it gives you a path to your save games. And once you have that selected and you select that folder, it'll actually go through and read everything that's in your inventory. And so everything that's in there will actually get populated as an icon, and you can actually go look at each one of these things and see, what you have. But the biggest thing, for me at least, is that it also looks for my modified content inside of your game and lets you know that this is a modded save. The benefit of this is that as updates come out in the future, these modded saves are the ones that need to be cared for a little bit more, in the sense that if you don't watch out for a modded save, it can very easily be corrupted due to the changes that are happening on the back end. So that's where this tool comes in handy, is actually being able to back up the saves. So if you go in here, you can actually select the different saves that you want to back up and back those up. And then once you've backed those up, I've also included a restore where you can go in here and look at the different ones based on modded or vanilla. And so you'll end up with this long list of saves along with a very quick window into the different assets or different things that you had in your inventory, so that you're able to quickly see, like, do I want to get this one again, or do I want to hot swap this one? So you can actually, here in the future, so say you really enjoy this one save, you can actually say restore this one, and it'll ask you which slot you want to restore it to, and you can actually restore it to any of these 4 slots that you have. These are also dependent on how many saves that you've actually made in the game. So sadly, even if you do go in here and have 4 different saves, these won't actually show up in your game until you've created 4 saves inside of the game. And then these can be modified. I'm not sure why they decided to set that up like that, but you basically can't have these slots activated as far as the testing I've done. If you know otherwise, please let me know. And so you're kind of at the mercy of making sure you create a save first. So even if you have to go start 3, new games really quick, this will allow you to get the saves here in the future. So I do have ideas in the future for actually having a little store, if you will, where you can go and see different saves that people have shared and what they liked about their saves. So you can already go in here and add little names and stuff like that, little nicknames to your game. And that will allow it to actually store that data along with your save. So anytime that you want to go back and find that one save, you can actually go and find that one. So if we go over here to modded, and then let me make sure that one, yeah, that's still working. So that's the Savegame tool. I was a big fan of that one to actually get all of that running. It's still early. Obviously, there needs to be polish. There needs to be more things with the interface. That will come with time. Then there was the multiplayer tool. The multiplayer tool allows you to be able to go in here and actually find out if your files match the other players. So if you're planning on hosting a game, and as always, the mod is 100% compatible with co-op. And so you can get that working multiplayer co-op. You just have to take a couple of steps to get it working. The biggest thing is that the game detects down to the bit if there's a change between players. It's looking for cheaters. It's looking for other people that have, hacked the game, whatnot. And so because of that, it's going to tell you if there's a mismatch, and it's not going to let you join each other. In order to play with the mod installed, you have to be able to go in here, so you can set yourself as the host or the player. And once you've done that, you can generate a validation file. and that validation file can then be sent to whatever other players want to join, and they can also send you a file. So if you hit this create co-op pack, it will actually create a bundle including your validation file that you can send over to your friends. It creates that at the install directory, so there's a little folder that will be created if we say create co-op pack. It'll go in here and make this I Am Legion co-op pack, and that one will contain everything. I think I didn't hit actually validate, so I have to actually generate the validation file first, and then we'll do it. So what it does is it basically just runs through your game really quick and checks all the different file sizes to make sure that everything is the same size. So then it hasn't detected another player. So then if we hit create co-op pack, it's now going to include that host validation, and you can then share this with any of the other players that you want to play your game. And once you've, this file is massive compared from where I've extracted files and whatnot from the game. So yours should be like 1 KB. But once you send that over to your other team players, it also includes in this bundle the actual mod. And so if you have the mod installed along with other mods, if you've set up everything exactly how you want it, including the mod config, you can actually hit create co-op pack and just immediately send everything over to them. It's already zipped up, so all they have to do is actually extract it into their main folder. So the idea is that they just open at any point, they can hit Dying Light 2 directory, it opens the directory, and they can just drag this right in. They're good. And so once they've done that, unless they have different files, and that's always the big challenge, is it depends on what they have in their folder. So even if they drag this in and all of a sudden you still have the mismatch, that's where you can actually have them send you their validation file, so you can tell them like, hey, it's not letting me join. Can you go over, select player 2 that's on their side, hit generate validation file, hit create co-op pack, send it to you, and then what you do is you just drop this co-op pack folder into the main folder as well, and it should include their player 2 validation file, and that will immediately allow you to just check what they have versus your files, and it will turn green or red based on the mismatch. And so my guess is, and after talking to a couple of different players, there are a lot of players who played the game 2 years ago, installed a mod, and forgot about it, updated the game, but they didn't remove that one mod that's been sitting there. Their game crashes. They don't know why. They've installed I Am Legion. Everything's crashing. They don't know what's going on. Well, this will allow you to very quickly just go and see if there's another file sitting there that's causing the crash. The next menu, that's a good transition, is this bug report. So the bug report screen was written to allow players to be able to let me know what's going on inside their game. So it stores all of the known information that you've selected inside of this launcher, and it will actually include several things. You can even select a screenshot directory. So if you've gone and you've taken a bunch of pictures of an issue, you can actually go select that directory. I added the log directory. Sadly, they have just turned off the freaking logs for the game. So if you're having a very simple crash due to a syntax error or something like that, I can't actually see why that's crashing anymore. So Techland, if you're listening, please turn that back on. That was useful somewhat. But anyway, once you go in here, you can hit create bug report. And the idea is that it will actually create a bug report inside the same folder as your launcher. So if we click that and we go back to this folder that has my launcher here, it's one of these. I always have a couple of thousand folders up at any one time. We have this bug report that's dated and you can send this to me if you join the Discord. If you've selected, one of my favorite features is that it also includes save games. If you've gone in here and you've set this up, it will also include those save games in your bug report, which is huge for actually being able to test what's going on with your game. But it will also include your mods as well. So I can immediately install your save, install your mods, read your summary, and actually go launch into it, read your description, and go test what's going on with the mod to figure out, the exact combination of things that have resulted in whatever you're seeing. And that's always, that's critical for any type of customization of the mod. Originally, when I only had, 3 difficulties and it was a single data pack, it was very easy to manage because, if it didn't work, it was something in there, it was specific. Did they have the latest version? That was pretty much all I had to worry about. But with all of the changes coming in with the modules, that's where it gets a little bit trickier, because if a player went in here and selected Deadly Humans, and then they also select the map changes Winter Slaughter, which I love Winter Slaughter, lots of fun things coming with that. I'm definitely not done. And then they also select War Zones. If they select all these different things and they install, the data that's going to be changed just from that playthrough is going to be a vastly different from a player who only selected a difficulty. And so kind of the idea here is that for sanity's sake, it helps to be able to very quickly go and assess, what's going on, what software is actually installed, so that you can kind of pinpoint where the bug is. And so that's one of the efforts. The bug report system has really come around to try to help with this idea of, what has changed, what, are players seeing in between versions, and especially with the events enabled. That's the one thing I'm not able to currently add to the bug report, and it's also the one that is 99% responsible for most of the issues that players run into, especially when there's an active event. I have no idea, no way of knowing what they've injected in the back end with the event code. And so because of that, I'm kind of shooting in the dark until I get as much information as possible. So this was my response, to try to get some of that information and be able to provide you guys with as much information as possible as well. I also included the mod supporter support bar here. So the idea is that if you want to actually unlock the Patreon content before, Patreon supporters were having to go online and actually download the content manually and then install. And one of the things that frustrated me is because I wanted to actually create their own launcher, or their own version of the installer, but at the same time, if they're having a bug, it's easier not to split the code. So what I've come up with is a way to get a code from Patreon. So if you are a subscriber, you can get a code from the tier that you've subscribed to. You can enter that code in here and hit submit, and it will actually unlock the different features inside the installer. So anything that I've released specific to the Patreon content, you'll immediately get that access here inside the launcher, and you can enjoy and just install it like you would any part of the rest of the mod. The key benefit to that is that it injects all of the code into the same packages, so you don't end up with additional mods. You really only end up with the same core structure, so that way it's easier to debug, it's easier to keep track of, and we don't have to worry as much about if you've got 7 other data packs in there, which one takes priority. It's all being compiled. So on the back end, the core mod is actually being installed as a single data pack. So you have the core software, and then all modules, events, pathways, languages are actually being wrapped together into their own pack and being injected into the game files. So if you're trying to immediately play the content and you want to go toggle the different modules or play with things, you can actually do that without having to worry too much about taking up another slot or using up something else. But I have mentioned before I was using like 5 or 6 different slots inside the pack files. Now I'm using up 2, so it is the data 2 and it's the data 3. So that's pretty much everything with the installer. I'll dive into this latest project now to kind of go through what I've been working on top of the mods. So this is kind of crazy, but I did manage to essentially reverse engineer their asset content inside the game. And I've essentially started working on a project that it's in Unity, but the idea here is that everything is being data driven. So what that means is that everything that's coming into this launcher or into this application is actually being driven by the data coming out of the game. The reason that's important is that if they make a change in the future, if there's an update, if there's different changes over time, and this has been the biggest problem with the amount of models and things that have been created by myself previously, is that when there's a change on the back end, you actually lose the references to the files and you end up with invisible zombies or invisible humans. What's exciting about this is that I've figured out a way to actually import all of the JSON data, and well, I'm creating JSON data based on the data inside the game to where it immediately pulls in the latest data from the game and then allows you to utilize that data to actually spawn. So this is just a sample of kind of the concept, is that it immediately allows you to actually access the game's content and actually view the models that are inside the game. For me, this is a major win because for a long time I've kind of been guessing at what these look like, how these behave. You know, when I go create custom versions of them, I'm kind of guessing at what I'm doing. I've been doing it by text essentially this entire time. Well, this actually allows me, so I'm writing a system that I'm pretty excited for. This system will actually be way more robust than a viewer. So this initial concept is just a model viewer because it's actually downloading the different content. Not downloading, I apologize. It's actually parsing the different content that's actually in the game, and it's pulling it in here. All the references are being set, and then as it goes through, it's actually using my new custom shaders. So I've just written a bunch of different shaders to try to support the amount of content. So I have essentially an entire game's worth of content getting moved into the game or into this engine. The idea is that I didn't want to have to actually go handcraft any of it. I wanted it to get pulled into here and then the system be able to actually update the information and use that information accordingly. And I just noticed, I apologize, I've zoomed in this content. Let me resize this here. But kind of the idea here is that as we continue to update here in the future, and there's changes on the back end, this code is actually going to go on to be something that I'm really excited about, which is it's going to be used as a character creation system. I've been creating, so now I just ran it the other day. Let me look here. So the mod is currently supporting 1,670 new models inside the game. That's compared to 2,100, and actually that's minus these folders in this file. So 2,108 files, 2,107 models in the base game, and most of those were not used. They were used for testing. I've now gone and created 1,670 new models. And when I did it before, as I mentioned, because I was using text to drive all of that, I was having to be gentle. I was having to be really careful of how I created these models, because if I got one thing wrong, I wouldn't know about it until I essentially just ended up with a invisible zombie or an invisible person inside the game. And that wasn't easy for debugging. I mean, you're basically just kind of guessworking your way through model creation. And that was incredibly frustrating. So now the idea is that with the concept of actually being able to see this, and because it's all data driven, the part that's super geeky for me, but actually gets me really excited, is the fact that if I can parse all the data and pull all the data in here, if I can load all the models, I've been reviewing other games' code and looking at how they set up things like character creation and that kind of thing, like how those things are set up inside the game. And so I'll just, as I'm talking here, so I have the live version, and then I actually have my own code that I've written that's on the back end that allows me to go fix things while I can actually pull in the same data that's in runtime, and sometimes actually a little bit more so. But the idea here is that if I can pull in all this different data, the part that's just crazy here is that after reviewing the code, which when I was parsing everything and pulling everything in, I was shocked at the amount of freaking errors that I got on the back end from just missing files. There was actually just a colossal ton of minimal errors that were left in here, where multiple artists, multiple groups, I guess, were working on writing code for this game. And over time, I guess, naming conventions and other things kind of fell apart, I guess, maybe at different parts of the game. So I've had to go in here. I basically have, so it's now been, this is essentially day 5, essentially working on this. But the idea is that as I'm parsing all the data and updating these things, each individual piece that's getting pulled in and populated actually ends up with a larger list of custom content inside this engine that has largely been left unused than most of the games. I mean, maybe other games have that as well. I mean, maybe there really is, that's a common thing, is that, you know, they just don't end up using large parts of the code, and that's something that I've never been exposed to. Maybe that is a thing. But I definitely have not ever seen the degree of name mismatches, but then onto the amount of materials that were just kind of added, but then not actually used inside the game. And the part that just kind of blows my mind is that there's so much that could be done with all of the data that's actually inside the game. There's so many new models and different things that could actually be very quickly created, but are not, for whatever reason. And so what I'm trying to work on now is actually go through, and I've written some code. I'm actually curious why some of these didn't get auto-assigned. But what I've been trying to do is basically I've written several scripts in here to where the idea is I don't want to have to actually manually do anything on these files. I actually want to be able to create the tools to where it's able to automatically do everything for me. So that way in the future, it's easier to maintain by itself. I don't actually have to support or change anything with updates. I actually just need to run some of the tools I've written inside the Unity engine, and it's able to pull that information immediately into the engine itself. But this whole thing is going to be open source. It's going to be available to whoever wants to mess around with it. The part that I'm not doing is releasing any of the resources that are actually inside the game. So if you want to actually continue the project or continue to build on the system, you can. You'll just need to go and figure out how to get the different components of it and get it hooked up. But outside of that, I've tried to leave that largely up to everybody to go and continue to build upon and create. So I'm super excited for this. I know what I've shown so far is kind of, I'm finding stuff as I go. Basically, I've written 4 custom shader graphs now, custom shaders using Unity's HDRP. So I'm not using URP. I'm actually HDRP for this. And what I've done is I've written a skin shader, a clothing shader, a decal shader, and then one additional one that is more in-depth hair shader that I haven't um, actually implemented yet. But kind of the idea here is, yeah, so one of the big challenges, so you can see here, so I'm trying to use the names of the textures themselves and actually create the materials based on the names of the textures so that the names of the textures could be used to index the different texture types that are available so that they can automatically be assigned to the material without any additional work. And for the most part, that's been, I mean, that gets maybe 70% of these materials. The rest of them, because the naming conventions, I mean, the PK are a nightmare. I don't know what the hell happened to the PK over there at Techland, but most of their content is just at a very interesting state where it's not actually able to, interesting, where it's not actually able to find most of the resources for the PK. They're just essentially like pieced together from all these different materials that are kind of scattered all over the place. And so you kind of have to guess at what the, and you can see here, here's a good example of the naming conventions. So you have like a couple of different ones that, you know, we've got our gradient, we've got our occlusion, but the naming across these, I mean, these are all the same type. I mean, they're all the same individual person, but the naming conventions are just all over the place, so that the end result ends up having to be pieced together. But luckily, for the most part, again, with the infected, it's really interesting that the infected are mainly like this. The humans follow a little bit closer pattern, but also have their own challenges. I'm just really surprised by that because it's like the meat and potatoes of the game is the infected. But I felt like after reviewing the code, feels like they kind of have their own stuff going on to where I'm not sure what got disjointed there to where their code and everything seems kind of so disorganized, but a lot of the naming conventions and a lot of the things set up for them just kind of seem to be all over the place. And so I'm having to do more of this manual actual adjustment. So you can see here, let's make sure to get rid of this generic gradient. But for the most part, it's been fairly straightforward. It just requires a lot of small changes to get everything to load in as expected. But once you actually get everything loaded in, and you go through and you make those changes and you fix some of those key materials, the end result is actually really pleasing. I've been super excited to actually be able to see more of it come together. And see, let's see, so we say pants. It's one of those, like, I know they're all in here, but actually making sure that they have their references. Let's see, so I swear this is one of the ones that was fully hooked up previously, but I'm saying here unless one of these indexes is off, it's throwing it for a loop, which those all look right. Maybe it's I've got a couple of these that I was just not able to find the actual materials that line up with these guys. So you just kind of do the best you can of getting the different ones on here. So I have it set up to where basically I get I get error reports when it's not able to find the material. For the most part, this is where you can just see the mismatch. And for the most part, it's not a big deal. You go and you make the change to a name here and there. But there's also been a large amount of ones that I haven't been able to actually find or identify. Probably my favorite thing about this is that everything is getting hooked up to where the lighting and everything is actually being calculated for it once you actually launch. So they look okay in the daylight, but for most of these infected, they're definitely much cooler at night. And so props to the lighting team or the development team who actually put these guys together. I'm a huge fan of their art, which has been kind of an ongoing conversation with the mod and modding in general. And my position has always been that I don't want to replace anything that the artist took the time to put together. I only want to try to add and expand onto the game and expand onto the game content so that people can enjoy more of that content instead of actually replacing anything that anyone has done. So if we say here, like, I was just seeing, I don't think I've actually had the Christmas bolter immediately load in yet with everything working. Let me see if he's, yeah. Nice. Wonder if that's supposed to light up. But it's funny because I went through and set up a lot of these things previously and then had them working on the standard textures, came back later and rewrote new textures. That stuff didn't carry over, sadly. And so ended up having to, go through here and basically hook all this stuff back up, which has just been kind of a slow pace kind of thing. But I've wanted to release this content multiple times. I released an earlier version so that people could do some early testing and give some feedback, and people seem pretty excited about it. And I definitely have enjoyed some of the conversations that have come from that. Now I'm just trying to get this latest version out, which I have all the plans put together for the 2.0 release. It's also going to include the weapons and the different armor variants. So that was the latest thing that I added to the to my JSON code, and it's actually one of the things I'm super excited about because you have these systems set up to where you can either go manually create all of these different systems, or you can try to utilize what's already been laid down. So the work that they've already done, which is the actual creation of all the different slight variations that they have on the armor throughout the game, instead of kind of blindly moving forward without having those at my disposal. I've set those up to where once I get to the character creation side of things, you'll actually be able to, it's interesting. Must be using a different one. Yeah, it's where there's the naming issue again. So we go in here and say, just delete these. And then we'll say load. It'll give me the names. Really tedious work. But for the most part, it's been really fun. It's been mainly nice to jump back into Unity again. This is where I was for several years before I actually went into leadership in design, and I haven't had as much time to be a part of the development. And I have just recently switched back to full-time development. And I'm having a blast while I'm at it. But probably the biggest thing in general is that it's always been interesting as a technical designer to try to go implement so many things yourself. So most of my work comes from 3D modeling and asset implementation. So there's a split there. Most people don't realize that, you know, making models is fun and things is fun, but it's the actual implementation of those models inside the game code that is kind of like the make or break. And yeah, see, I set all these guys up just the other day, and they're back down again. And so I've been working in asset implementation for a while, and I was doing it all by hand, which, you know, is as fun as that sounds. And over the years, it's been exciting to get back into my code to where I can actually go and write code that does most of the heavy lifting for me instead of having to manually write everything myself. And then this is a fun one. So with most of these, this took a while to figure out in the actual code. I did this by hand inside the model files. So they've got multiple references to the same material. It's the exact same. They've taken the same texture sheet and they've just changed the name conventions to where what you're seeing here, like where the arms and the head aren't actually loading in, that's because it's using the exact same material. The names are just different. So you have to go in here and actually, and I did this earlier, it's just not with the new custom shaders, and the code kind of lost those references. So now I'm having to go manually hook those back up. But the eye is actually, yeah. But you actually have to go in here and kind of manually hook up some of these things. But it's interesting. Like, it's already getting the gains of just knowing a little bit more than doing it inside the model files, because you're essentially just running blind when you're doing this inside the text files, because you don't actually have the references. One of the biggest things is we don't have the references to the materials. So you can actually parse all the data in the model files and everything to get the resulting material files that are available, but those only tell part of the story. There's also a lot of things that are not exposed that now that I actually have this, they, for the most part, they are. Because by doing this, I actually have more of this available to review, and I can also see where it fails. What's really exciting about this as well, and I was talking to some of the other modders about this the other day, is that a lot of developers or modders for the game have been creating custom textures, such as Sneed, but have probably always had to go inside the editor or launch the game to actually be able to see the resulting changes that they're making to the models or to the textures as they go, due to not being able to inject that code easily inside the game. Well, utilizing something like this, you basically, I'm setting it up to where all of this could be, you could actually take your texture packs and set them up with my application so that you can use that to update the models with your custom textures. So you're not having to guess, or you're not having to go load up the entire engine to basically go see if these worked. Instead, you can simply inject the new custom textures that you've created, and as long as they've overridden the ones that are in the game or are in my packs, it will actually show up as the replacement one, and it will load those in, which has also been the goal of trying to set up so many of these systems so that it's able to easily do something like that. So each one of these textures are actually being, not textures, I apologize, each one of these materials are being dynamically generated at runtime by using the data that's populated from the JSON in when it's loading everything. So it's actually going through and setting everything as it's going. And so what that gains, or what that gets us, is it has the ability for us to do exactly what I'm describing, of being able to replace the path. So you're no longer having to go and assign anything, really. You're not having to manually do anything other than give it a new texture folder, or at least have it check that folder first. And then if no files are found, it just switches back to the fallback, which is the default, which is the in-game textures. So essentially here in the future, you could have a whole, game's worth of replacement textures inside that folder that you are then injecting into an RPack and getting inside the actual game. But for testing and for actually creating the changes, you could actually go in here and very quickly. So for example, similar to what I'm sitting here doing, what I was going to mention is that kind of how I'm sitting here loading and unloading. This is instantiating a new material, a new model each time based on the JSON data. So anytime you make a change, all you have to do is unload and reload that data. The same is true of if you wanted to create a suite for designing textures for these models. You could actually have an update button or a refresh button to where instead of it repopulating the model, it actually just runs the same code to update their materials dynamically. And so if you're sitting there with your Photoshop or whatever, and you want to essentially link the two, you could hit save on Photoshop, update inside the application, and immediately see your changes applied. And the best part is it's with all the other maps, which for anybody who's developed models before, working on one independent texture is fun and all, but it really it's a lot of fun once you actually have your emissive map and your spec and your normal map, and you go full PBR, and it is just like so exciting to see your work come to life. And do well. But I'm getting ready to continue this on into the weekend. I didn't get as far as I wanted just because I haven't fixed everything yet. Obviously, it's never going to be perfect. I'm never going to actually go through and fix every single model. The challenge is that with some of these models, they're not actually even in the game. They're in here, but they didn't actually implement them into the actual game itself. So because of that, it's like you go and you get this all working here, and then you're like, was it worth it? I don't know. So I'm going to continue to push forward on getting these guys in. Really the goal of this is to just get as many of these custom textures get as many of these parsed materials working as possible. Because the baseline is kind of where I would like to start to make sure that this is all working as expected, so that when I do set up the code for everything to be for the actual character creator, all of that is set up properly to where I can go make variations and changes while also assuming that everything is correct inside the JSON file so that it's immediately injected back into the game. But the goal here is that once these are set up, kind of the fun idea is that you'll actually be able to go in here and grab the head, and actually hit next, scroll over, actually be able to select a head, select an actual texture for your face, select the details on your face, select the hair, select facial hair, select the outfit, select your arms. Everything will be set up in a way to where you can just immediately hit export on creating new outfits, new designs, and based on what I've seen on the back end, again, I'm super excited. I'm still, my mind is reeling at the fact that there's so many different variations and different things that you could do, that I've learned so much in the process of getting this data hooked up and understanding more of how they're actually using the data inside the game. That even if this isn't extremely optimized as I'm going to want to make it, just the ability to visually understand the data that you're working with and be able to save that. I'm talking about when it comes to like outfits and factions and whole stories that you want to write. You can create this concept of, I have this really fun idea of actually designing a unit or designing companions, and actually sending them, over, instead of like creating a new one in blank canvas. You actually create like a soldier or someone, and you tell them, like, you hit like I'm done, and they go walk over to the side, and then you continue on with your next one. And at any time you can double click the guy off to the side and he'll come walking back. There's just so many fun things that I'm going to try to do with the amount of data that I have at my disposal, and I'm super excited to show you guys, where that goes over the next coming weeks. But this is kind of a early flex. I'm going to start diving back into my own game code and working on some additional projects here soon. But this is a fun way to transition all the crazy stuff I've been doing with I Am Legion over to Unity again and get back to good game dev. So cheers, everyone. I'm actually going to take off. Thank you if you stopped by, if you listened. I'm really looking forward to catching up with you guys more here coming up. Thank you for everybody who's continued to support my work. It's been crazy, almost 2 years now, and I look forward to talking to you guys soon. Take care.